Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us today. My name is Victor from Commvault, and I'm happy to introduce my two esteemed colleagues. Kevin?
My name is Kevin Sellinger. I am a virtual infrastructure administrator. I am responsible for ISU's private and public cloud.
Hi, and I'm Sean Pupanich. I'm a solutions architect with AWS, and I help customers like you move to cloud as well as understand how to use Commvault on AWS.
All right. So guys, data protection, right? This is the topic of today. And what does Commvault do? So what we're going to try to do in the next 10 to 12 minutes is take you through data protection for cloud and a real live example we're going to have from Illinois State on how they were able to do that. So for those of you who are not familiar with Commvault, in brief, Commvault is a data protection and data management company. And why is that so topical in today's age? Is as more and more workloads are starting to move to the cloud, you're starting to get more data silos. And the need has started to grow for a centralized way to manage all of that environment. And that's really, in a nutshell, what a data protection solution from Commvault provides you. Provides you centralized management and the ability to manage all of that data, be able to understand where it resides, monitor its SLAs, and help you to accelerate towards cloud. With that in mind, I'm going to introduce Illinois State University, the challenge they had, and how they started to use Commvault to protect their workloads in AWS. Kevin?
So ISU's motto shows our deep roots as a teaching school since 1857. While ISU has been doing a great job producing sharp teachers, we are expanding our technical offerings with programs in the cybersecurity, game design, and engineering. Illinois State University is the first public higher education university, of course, that has offered a varsity esports program, and it has been very popular. Activities around research computing have been gaining traction at ISU for the past several years, thanks to our high-performance computing cluster.
Awesome.
So an important thing to understand about adopting the cloud is we are responsible for resilience of the cloud. Our customers are responsible for resilience in the cloud. So it's up to you to make sure that you're using the right services and the right configuration to achieve that. So for example, we have S3 storage that will replicate your data to 3 different availability zones. But if you don't want to have to use the HTTP APIs directly, you want a solution like Commvault that's going to manage a lot of that back-end infrastructure complexity for you and make it easy for you to use the same processes you've been using in your own data centers on AWS. One of the important parts of transforming your environment to cloud is understanding the key differences. And so we have this pay-as-you-go environment. And so what that means is you can spin up an entire data center's worth of infrastructure and tear it right back down. This is great for DR purposes, for security testing, for game day testing if you have actually security response events that you do with your staff. And it's even good for if you have a hybrid environment. So if you're trying to manage, maintain your existing data center and existing staff and not have that double up, then you can start to scale into cloud without adding that additional infrastructure, that additional headcount, and still get that same value that you're looking for. So your team stays more focused on your applications and your workloads and less on the nuts and bolts of the bottom infrastructure. I'd like to also have Kevin tell you a little bit about his experience adopting Commvault and AWS and how that's affected ISU.
So overall, we're looking at a hybrid cloud strategy. We're wanting to minimize the physical locations that we have at the university. Right now, we do have 2 data centers, and we're looking at consolidating into a single. And now that we no longer have kind of like a DR site, we are wanting to look for another site that kind of has the multiple use cases. So that way we can only have like another data center off-premise that also serves as our DR site as well. So we're looking for like offsite backup copies to be stored in AWS, be able to do disaster recovery, a second active data center, and also have high availability within that data center. The biggest thing that Commvault really does provide for us, since we have our backups out in AWS, we can do cross-hypervisor restores. So just because we're running VMware on-premise, that doesn't mean that we can't restore to an EC2 instance in AWS. That's where DR really kind of comes in for AWS and is a key player for us. And then having those backup copies in AWS does solve all of the problems that we were looking at and consolidating into a single data center. So now, I'd kind of like to walk through our kind of the backup and DR architecture that we have. We have multiple ways that we kind of back things in, back up into the hyperscale platform. We have containers, we have virtual machines, and we have standalone agents as well. And all of those kind of get backed up into that hyperscale daily. Then at that point, we have our local backups on premise. If we need to restore, we can restore directly from that cluster. But where this really shines is that the hyperscale cluster then pushes everything into AWS through that Commvault access node. And we also have those nodes as EC2 instances. You can see up there we also have OpenShift out in AWS as well. So we really do kind of have that full backup platform that we can restore anything and everything into AWS. And then once it actually is out in AWS, it gets stored into S3 buckets. Typically, if you're going to need a backup, you're going to want like the most recent backup, or maybe the second one if the first one, if there's something wrong with it for whatever reason. That's why we have opted to put it directly into S3 buckets, and then slowly as the data ages, we push it into Glacier. Glacier's a little cheaper than regular S3, so that's how we're able to trim the bill down a little bit. The one thing that is not on this slide that really reduced the bill for us is an S3 endpoint gateway. If we did not when we did not have that in place, we were actually using AWS's WAN to go out and come right back in. So putting that endpoint in place really was a huge cost savings.
Very cool. Yeah, and very valid point from Kevin around cost savings, because when you think of what Kevin just described, this is a very common use case we see across various industries, various workloads. If you notice what Kevin mentioned about S3 and how he had that ability to do data lifecycle management. So not only is he backing up into AWS, but they're starting to get more intelligent about how they figure out cost optimization. So as data was older and less needed, it started to move to a different storage tier. A year ago, at this same show, we had announced integration with a new storage class from AWS, which was Glacier Instant Retrieval. And you will notice over the history, we've had a long history with product development directly with AWS for those exact reasons. As AWS comes up with new services, one of the things that Commvault's been very keen on is making sure we have that tight integration to allow the breadth of services for a customer like ISU to be able to utilize. So if I wanted to summarize really the value proposition of why use something like Commvault when you're thinking of that hybrid workload or you're moving from on-prem to cloud, it really comes down to these three pillars, right? So the first one, and I mentioned this in the beginning, is that idea of a centralized management. One interface, one single pane of glass, and I can see my SLAs, I can have reporting, I can see which workloads are being backed up on-prem, which workloads are being backed up to AWS, which are being restored. So I have that kind of single visibility, and that becomes more and more important as you start to have workloads in different environments. The second thing is, and Sean alluded to this in the beginning, is the ability to protect against ransomware. So Commvault software has ransomware protection built into the solution. So not only do we back up the environment, but we provide within our software abilities like anomaly detection and early warning and monitoring to tell us if something's been compromised. One of those API integrations I was talking about is, if you're familiar with S3, S3 has a really cool feature called object lock, which is the ability to make storage immutable. We were one of the early adopters to make sure we integrate to that. So what does that mean for us? It means when you're backing up to AWS, you have the ability to have an immutable, untouched copy. And so in the case of a ransomware attack, you can recover from that backup copy knowing it's been immutable. So these are some of the ideas that once you start to do backup, you start to think, what more can I do? And then finally, goes back to that cost optimization, right? So one of the things that Commvault does for you as well, not just back up the workload as is, but start to do intelligent deduplication, compression. So you're really optimizing your cloud environment. Sean, if you want to add.
So I do just want to add, I work with all of the storage partners with AWS, and so in a very important part of customers getting value out of all the new features and services that AWS launches is if you're using a piece of software specific to your use case, backup and disaster recovery, and they've taken the time to integrate all of our latest features, making sure that you can security optimize, cost optimize, performance optimize. That's how you're going to get the best results. So while you have a lot of choices to be able to do backup and DR, it's the partners that invest the most in optimizing on our platform that are going to give you the best results. And so when we talk about highly durable storage, immutable storage, and faster time to recovery, I think those are really the areas where Commvault shines.
And finally, guys, one thing to leave you with here is this, back to that centralization and simplifying your use of third-party software with AWS. Commvault, a year ago, launched our software on the AWS Marketplace. So what does that provide us? It provides us two very important things. One of them, it simplifies the deployment, automates it. So now if you wanted to deploy Commvault fully in the cloud, you have pre-existing instances, sized images that are pre-built for you to go ahead and do that. But also importantly, you have a centralized procurement model, because now you have the ability to purchase that Commvault software through the AWS Marketplace, and when you get your monthly invoice and monthly bill for AWS, you have the Commvault software just like any line item from any service that you're procuring. So it also simplifies and gives you cost control here.
Yeah, so it's much faster to get online. You're using automated templates that have been reviewed by Commvault and AWS engineers, and so you're able to get value immediately. We also have the AWS EDP program, so if you're a large customer and you have a contract with us, purchases you make through the AWS Marketplace count towards that. And so that's a way that you don't have to keep spinning up more EC2 or more S3. You can actually just purchase Commvault, and that will count towards that discount program.
And maybe a final note, you'll see some, and that's not every partner. As you know, the AWS Marketplace has an ability to also allow resellers to go through it. So whatever your reseller or partner of choice, you can absolutely work with them to make sure that they are, the same AWS reseller can help you create offers, and you can purchase from them through the marketplace. So just to summarize, guys, and we appreciate your time today, it's a small lightning session. Data protection, it benefits you if you're on-prem, it benefits you in the cloud, but it really benefits you as you're starting to move towards cloud. And maybe one final thought here is, when you're actually going through that journey, and everyone is in a different journey with this cloud consumption, when you're actually starting to move more and more workloads to the cloud, so Commvault helps you now and helps you in the future, because as we mentioned with the AWS team, not only do we protect workloads from on-prem moving to cloud, but we protect your workloads in the cloud. So in the ISU example, they were starting to move some of their databases and some of their virtual machines. Once you start in the future, you want to start to use some of AWS's managed services, like RDS. Well, guess what? Commvault doesn't just protect on-prem databases, but protects the cloud-native databases as well. So with that, guys, we're done. We're happy to answer questions. We'll be on the side. And we'll also have our Commvault booth very close by over here if you want to come for more questions. Thank you so much.